The frozen air inside the house felt like stepping into an open freezer. I shoved the front door of our Madison residence wider, bracing for the usual chaotic greeting of the new year. But the entire house was dead silent. Every single light was off, and a sudden, sharp instinct told me something was terribly wrong. I dropped my bags onto the entryway rug and sprinted down the hallway toward the master bedroom. My dad was lying curled on his side at the edge of the bed, his entire shirt soaked in cold sweat as he gasped for oxygen. He was clearly in the middle of a massive heart attack, clutching his chest with trembling fingers while fighting just to draw a single breath. I rushed to the bedside and immediately reached for my phone to call emergency services, but a bright square of paper on the nightstand caught my eye. Resting right beside his medicine bottle was a single yellow sticky note written in my cold, careless handwriting. It held no emergency phone numbers, no frantic warnings, and absolutely zero concern. It simply read, "Your mother and sister went to Maui. Stay and take care of your dad. They had literally abandoned him on the edge of death so they would not miss their luxury island vacation." As I dialed 911, my dad reached out and grabbed my wrist, his grip surprisingly firm as he looked up at me and whispered, "Help me teach them a lesson." By 6 the next morning, the rhythm of a heart monitor filled the intensive care unit. I sat rigid in a plastic chair, watching my dad fight his way back to stability. The attending cardiologist walked into the room, holding a clipboard and looking extremely grave. He explained that my dad had suffered a massive myocardial infarction, adding that if the ambulance had arrived 5 minutes later, he would not have made it. I swallowed the lump in my throat and stepped out to fill out his admission forms. When I reached the section for designated emergency contact, I signed my own name as his sole legal decision maker, knowing the two people who belonged on that line were currently halfway across the Pacific. Later that afternoon, my dad shifted against the white sheets and slowly opened his eyes. He blinked against the harsh lighting, his gaze searching the small room before finally settling on my face. "Where's your mother?" he asked in a barely audible rasp. I could not bring myself to say the words out loud, so I just looked down at my hand in heavy silence. My refusal to speak told him everything he needed to know. He let out a long breath, pointed toward his phone resting on the bedside table, and waited while I handed it over. He unlocked the screen, tapped on a social media app, and stared at the glowing display. Right at the top of his feed was a fresh photo posted just 3 hours prior. My mother, Brenda, and my sister, Chloe, were sitting on a sunny patio overlooking the ocean in Maui. Brenda was holding a glass of high-end champagne with a massive smile, while Chloe posed with 4 oversized shopping bags from a luxury boutique. The caption read, "Leaving the winter freeze behind for paradise, loving the real life." My dad stared at the photo for 3 long minutes while the heart monitor beeped at an accelerated pace. He did not yell and he did not throw the phone. He simply turned the screen off, laid it face down on his chest, and stared directly at the ceiling tiles. For my entire life, my dad had excused their absolute selfishness, constantly claiming my mother was just stressed or that Chloe needed a break from her job. But sitting in that cold hospital room, the excuses finally ran completely dry. He turned his head toward me, his eyes stripped of their usual blind patience, replaced by a dark, calculating intensity. "There is a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards in my home office," he whispered, leaning toward me with extreme focus. "Go back to the house, get the gray metal box inside, and do not tell a single soul what you are doing." I drove back through the quiet streets, locked myself inside his office, and dropped down onto my knees beneath the massive oak desk. I ran my fingers along the wood grain until I felt the loose plank he described. Using a flat screwdriver from the garage, I popped the wood floorboard open with a loud snap. Nestled in the dark cavity was a heavy gray security box covered in a thin layer of dust. I hauled the heavy metal container out, secured it in my trunk, and drove straight back to the hospital without wasting a single second. When I re-entered the room, my dad had adjusted his bed into an upright position. I placed the gray safe onto his rolling tray, and his fingers quickly punched in a 4-digit code. The lock gave a heavy mechanical click, and the top swung open. Inside were no stacks of cash or expensive jewels, but rather thick legal folders stamped with court seals and official notary marks. He pulled out the top binder, rested it on his lap, and looked up at me. "Your grandfather, Arthur, passed away 4 months ago," my dad explained, his voice gaining strength. "He spent his entire life quietly building a massive commercial real estate portfolio. He explained that because of the sheer size of the estate, the legal probate process had taken months to clear the court system, only finalizing 2 weeks prior. Brenda knows nothing about this inheritance," he said, tapping the official document. "I kept it quiet because I wanted to see how she would treat me before making any permanent financial choices." He handed me the summary page, and my breath caught in my throat. The total value of the inherited assets was over $26 million, held in high-yield trusts along with a clean title to a private waterfront compound on Lake Mendota. Under state law, inherited assets are strictly classified as separate property, my dad stated with absolute calm. It does not belong to the marital estate, meaning Brenda has no legal claim to a single cent. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his wallet, and stared at an old family photo of the four of us from years ago. For decades, he had poured his entire income into supporting my mother and sister while I paid off my own college tuition on a preschool teacher's salary without ever asking for a dime. I was wrong for so many years, he said softly, looking directly into my eyes. I gave them every single resource I had, and the moment I became a burden, they left me to die on the floor, he continued, his grip tightening around my hand. I am going to make sure you are protected, Julie, because you are the only person who actually cares if I live or die. Looking at the legal paperwork, I knew we had to strike before my mother and sister returned from their trip. We need to get his lawyer here right now, I insisted, matching his quiet intensity. We need every legal wall built and sealed before their flight touches down back home. By Thursday afternoon, my dad, attorney Mr. Harrison, entered the hospital room carrying a thick leather briefcase, accompanied by a notary and a formal legal witness. Before any paperwork could be signed, the attending cardiologist performed a mandatory mental evaluation to ensure my dad was fully capable of making binding legal decisions. My dad answered every single question with absolute clarity, stating his name, the date, and his exact intent to structure his separate estate. The doctor documented his full legal sanity in the medical record, cleared the room, and allowed us to proceed with the execution of the documents. Mr. Harrison pulled out an irrevocable trust agreement and placed it on the tray. By signing this, my dad was permanently transferring the entire $26 million inheritance and the Lake Mendota property into a protected legal vault. The contract officially named me as the sole trustee and the absolute sole beneficiary of the entire estate. Once this pen hits the paper, these assets are completely disconnected from your personal name, Mr. Harrison explained clearly. Your wife cannot touch them, contest them, or claim them in a divorce proceeding. My dad took the pen and signed every page without a second of hesitation. With the trust fully executed, my dad asked for his cell phone and called his bank main customer service line, placing the call on speaker. He immediately revoked my mother's status as an authorized user on every credit account, froze all open lines of equity under his name, and initiated a total transfer of his personal savings into a new private account. When the agent asked if he wanted to close their joint credit cards, my dad gave a cold smile and instructed them to leave those specific cards active. He knew my mother was currently swiping those exact cards all over Hawaii, meaning every single dollar of luxury debt would now land squarely on her personal credit profile. My dad was officially discharged from the hospital on Friday, and I brought him back to the empty house to wait for the final phase of the plan. On Saturday evening, a taxi cab pulled up the driveway, and the loud, demanding voices of my mother and sister echoed across the lawn. They unloaded 4 giant suitcases and half a dozen luxury bags, complaining loudly about the Wisconsin cold. They walked through the front door, dropping their luggage in the entryway while scenting the hall with expensive perfume, entirely ignoring the fact that my dad had been in the hospital all week. Chloe walked into the living room, glanced at the small box of heart medications on the table, and immediately let out a loud scoff of annoyance. "Is this place seriously still a mess?" Chloe snapped, rolling her eyes as she dropped her coat on the sofa. "You were supposed to stay here and keep the house clean, not leave depressing medical junk all over the place." Brenda walked in right behind her, demanding that I immediately pick up their heavy suitcases and carry them upstairs so they could unpack their vacation purchases. I stood completely still, crossing my arms and staring at them with total silence. Before my mother could start screaming at me for disobeying her, the wooden cane struck the floorboards with a loud, sudden bang. My dad rolled his wheelchair out from the hallway shadow, his eyes piercing and utterly devoid of warmth. "Sit down right now," he commanded in a voice that left no room for debate. The office door opened and Mr. Harrison walked into the living room, pulling 2 stapled legal packets out of his briefcase and sliding them across the glass coffee table toward the 2 women. Brenda picked up the packet with a look of extreme confusion, while Chloe leaned over her shoulder to read the main title. Mr. Harrison calmly explained that Arthur had left a $26 million estate entirely to my dad, and that every single asset had already been legally transferred into an irrevocable trust naming me as the sole owner and beneficiary. Brenda's face turned completely ghostly white, the papers shaking violently in her hands as the massive fortune slipped right through her fingers. "This is illegal!" Brenda screamed, jumping to her feet in a violent rage. "We have been married for 30 years, and I will sue you for every single penny of that money." Mr. Harrison did not even flinch at her wild outburst. State law explicitly protects inherited assets as separate property, the lawyer responded with ultimate calm. Because these funds were never mixed into your joint bank accounts, you have zero legal right to them, and any lawsuit you file will be thrown out immediately. Chloe slammed her fists against the table, her face red with fury as she glared directly at me. You are giving millions of dollars to a basic preschool teacher while leaving your real family with nothing? Chloe shrieked. My dad simply reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a fresh envelope, and dropped it onto the glass table. Read the cover page, my dad said, his voice dropping to a low, icy whisper. Brenda pulled the document closer, her eyes widening in absolute horror as she read the bold lettering across the top. These are your official divorce papers, my dad added with zero emotion. They have already been formally processed with the county clerk. By Monday morning, a massive moving truck backed up to the house, and 3 movers began hauling out my dad's personal belongings, his clothes, and his medical equipment. Brenda ran out into the hall, wildly shouting that he could not abandon her in their family home. My dad reached out his window and handed her a final white envelope from the bank. That is an official foreclosure notice, my dad stated coldly. I stopped paying the mortgage last month, and since you took out that massive second loan to pay for your shopping sprees, the bank is seizing the house in 60 days. Brenda gasped for air, realizing he had cut off every single stream of financial support she had depended on for decades. You planned this whole thing, she whispered, trembling as she stared at the paper. How am I supposed to survive without your money? You can figure that out on your own, my dad replied, signaling the driver to pull away. As we drove off, my phone buzzed with an automated alert from the bank. Brenda had just tried to check into a luxury hotel downtown, only for her gold credit card to be instantly declined at the front desk due to frozen credit lines. She was standing in the lobby with zero cash, zero open credit, and total financial devastation resting entirely on her own shoulders. I locked my phone, looked over at my dad, and drove toward our new life by the lake. A full year has passed since that cold winter night, and the transformation in our lives has been extraordinary. My dad completed a rigorous cardiac rehabilitation program, completely threw away his cane, and now walks 3 miles around our Mendota lakefront property every single morning. I officially left my teaching job to manage the family trust full-time, working beside financial planners to secure our future in total peace. We spend our evenings watching the sun set over the water, completely free from the toxic noise that used to consume our lives. Meanwhile, Brenda and Chloe suffer the absolute full weight of their own destructive actions across town. After the bank foreclosed on the family home, they were forced to move into a tiny, outdated apartment in an industrial zone. Chloe attempted to pull a fraudulent real estate deal to pay off her mounting Hawaii credit card debt, resulting in the state board permanently revoking her real estate license. Today, the woman who used to flaunt designer bags works as a low-level retail clerk at a local mall, standing on her feet for minimum wage just to cover her basic expenses. My mother's situation turned out equally harsh after the divorce finalized, with her receiving absolutely zero settlement money. Forced to work for the first time in 30 years, Brenda currently works the night shift as a front desk clerk at a budget motel along the highway. She spends her nights behind bulletproof glass, handing out plastic room keys to tired travelers while struggling to pay her half of the rent. Neither of them has attempted to call us, proving that we were only ever valuable to them for what we could provide. True family is revealed in the moments when you have nothing left to offer, and greed will always destroy the people who value money over human life.